All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Thursday, September 26th, and I am Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and this is All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network, your daily fix of all things Texas Longhorns, right here on YouTube, streaming Tuesday through Friday at 12 o'clock, and then also immediately following whatever time the Longhorn game ends for our immediate reaction on Saturday, 5 days a week, your 30-minute fix for all things Horns right here. And Jake, it is the start of SEC week for the Texas Longhorns. They go into conference play for the first time, and they will be taking on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, heavily favored, 38.5-point favorites in that game. Again, we mentioned it in earlier this week that is actually more than they were favored by UTSA. But Jake, just what are your thoughts going into this game, and maybe even some players to watch out for?
Well, first off, if we would have made a bet 3 years ago when this kind of all got announced, and I told you, hey, I bet you Texas is going to be 38.5 point favorites in their first game in conference play, I think you would have called me stupid or
Yeah,
crazy or
or crazy,
both, right?
or it, well, here's the thing too, Jake. Is my biggest thing was, I don't know, since what, 2010, 2011, until 2024, it was Texas can't handle the SEC schedule week in and week out. It's such a difficult. You just get grinded each and every single week. You just can't survive a full season of it week to week to week to week. So for the last decade, maybe decade and a half, that's all we've heard. Up, down years for SEC doesn't matter. The one season, the very first season Texas gets into the SEC, well, you just have a weak schedule. You got a weak SEC schedule. You're just playing nobodies for the whole season. Okay, dude, I'm done even fighting that narrative at this point.
Yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it too, because people would say the argument has always been SEC's, yes, very good, but it's very top heavy. And people go, no, it's the toughest conference because from bottom to top or top to bottom, it is the toughest conference. And then now Texas is in it, and it's like, well, it's weak, but it's the same narrative that falls anytime Texas wins a big game. They beat Alabama last year. This is the worst Alabama team ever, which, by the way, fun stat, Georgia and Alabama since 2017 in the months of September and October are 62-1.
Mm.
I wonder who that one loss is to.
Yeah, I
Um,
wonder. And when did that happen? Oh yeah, that was last season, and in Tuscaloosa, I may add. By the way, but yeah, it is one of those things, Jake, where um, you can't win for losing, and you can't lose for winning. And so some players to watch though. Isaac Smith, the linebacker there on that side of the ball, is questionable for the game. He is one of their leading players, and then also on the running back position. Talk a little bit about the running backs, Jake.
yeah, they have three very capable running backs, but I believe one of them is out. I'm actually pulling up the injury report, little live look here, but yeah, Kayvon Lee is actually going to be out for the game, and obviously Shapen's going to be out at quarterback. But other than Kayvon Lee, they have Johnny Daniels and Davon Booth, who you're going to see get most of the carries. They are good runners. They haven't had the best of blocking at times. They did run the ball much better against Florida, but again, Florida doesn't seem like a SEC top team, if you will. And obviously they got blown out by another, by A&M and then also by Miami at home. But and then blew out Mississippi State, so that can kind of tell you what to expect from Mississippi State. But those are guys who the Longhorns are going to have to key in and tackle them and attack them just like they did against Michigan. Just, you don't want them getting yards after contact. We saw on that one possession that we nitpicked up and down, all week against ULM, that it was a lot of yards after contact. And so that's going to be something to watch to avoid. And then at the wide receiver position, you have Kevin Coleman Jr. He's only 5'11", 180, but he is a playmaker. He's a guy that they're probably going to be trying to hit on play action, take some deep shots too. And so that's who the secondary is going to kind of be keyed in on. And so I think that's going to be Obviously the Longhorns have gone against Jeff Lebby. He was the OU offense coordinator last year. Obviously, he had success against Texas. That was arguably their worst defensive game, unless you want to say Washington. And so I'm
I
sure
think you
he's
can
going
just
to
chalk
be.
that up to really good offense and quarterback play, though.
Yes, but still, he had a scheme. When he went up tempo, it was effective. Does he feel like he can go up tempo against the Longhorns? That I would say probably not with the talent he has at Mississippi State as opposed to what he had at Oklahoma last year.
And they're very good at it. Is something that I think one thing that people need to understand about the fast paced up tempo offenses is it's not necessarily just constant 24/7. It's very timely as to when you can do it and it be effective in doing it. And it's whenever you've got a little bit of momentum. Sometimes it doesn't benefit you at all just to go three pass plays that are off rhythm, not feeling it. Your team's not really in a groove or anything. And then you just go 3 and out and you take maybe 5 seconds off the game clock. And then you just punt it back to a high powered offense like Texas. That's not going to benefit you. But he is a very good coach when it comes to running that scheme and time and running it in a timely fashion and it be efficient. And so he is one of the best in the country at doing that. So again, just a note to kind of keep an eye out on for a Texas scouting report. Jake, real quickly, this is a new thing that is happening this year. Don't want to go ahead and don't want to bury the lead on that. But the SEC, you are now required to release an injury report. Sark was very transparent when it came to the reasoning behind this, and it's gambling. It's so people don't have to do the guesswork anymore. And the fact that he just came out and said that, I thought was brilliant. But it is a requirement now that teams release the injury report prior to the game, and it basically has to stay that way. So if a player's out, he's out. Blake Shapen, quarterback for Mississippi State, out. Creed Whitmore, the wide receiver, out. Two wide receivers actually for Mississippi State, along with Trent Hudson. And then you already touched on Kayvon Lee as well. He's going to be out. For Texas, though, the bigger news, added running backs to that list. Velton Garner is going to be out. Colin Page, who played at the end of that UL Monroe game, he is going to be doubtful. Derek Williams, also doubtful. Quinn Ewers, questionable. Jelani McDonald, questionable. And Trey Wisner, running back, questionable. So total on the injury report for Texas is 5 running backs out, doubtful, or questionable going into this game.
Not only the running backs, but the safety position too. With Jelani McDonald and Derek Williams Jr., that's going to be something to watch going forward. Thank goodness Texas has a bye week before OU and Georgia. That bye week could not come at a better time, and there'll be a lot to talk about in that bye week, so we won't be searching for content by any means. But that's going to be very important for the Texas team to get healthy, because while they've avoided widespread injuries, I would say, across the whole team, the injuries that they have had have obviously been very concentrated. I mean, there's a chance the running back room is going to have 2 scholarship healthy running backs, one a true freshman, for their first SEC game, which is wild. And that's why, people last year were kind of surprised whenever Gibson and Clark were recruited, and they're like, why 2 running backs? This running back room's already loaded. Well, this is why, because injuries happen, and season-ending injuries happen, and it's important to have that competitive depth.
Well, Jake, speaking of the injury report, we are going to have a very cool interview for tomorrow's episode. Everybody's going to want to stay tuned into that. It is a orthopedic surgeon whose specialty is in the sports medicine field. And so we're going to have a conversation with him about these injuries, the length of time some of these injuries take. Again, he hasn't necessarily worked directly with the players, but he has a very good idea in terms of the length of time that it takes and the severity of these injuries and how to really, process and work those out and to get that full rehab and to get them ready to go for the season. So you're going to want to tune in tomorrow if you want a little bit more details on the injuries for the Texas Longhorns. Again, tune in at noon tomorrow. We're going to have a really great interview for everybody coming up. And it's actually the very first interview here on All In Horns, something that we're extremely excited about. So, Jake, let's go ahead and I want to play a little bit of a game, man. I want to play a little bit of buy or sell and we've got some questions for you. We've got some hypothetical situations. Jake, we're going to start this one off with you. I'll take the next one first, and then we'll flip back and forth from there on. So let's go ahead and the playoffs will have 6 SEC teams this year. Jake, are you buying or are you selling?
I mean, as of right now, I would say buy, just because of the fact that you got, just counting it, you got Georgia, you got Bama, you got Ole Miss, you got Tennessee, you got Texas, you got possibly a Missouri. OU's technically not even out of it yet. We'll see how they look with a new quarterback. And then you
Missouri is the make or break.
Yeah, whether Missouri gets in or not, and they have a schedule that if they are near the team they are supposed to be this year, they should get in. And so Missouri will kind of be one of the determining factors. I just said in our previous episode that I think LSU is very overrated, but they are a team that is still in it. And so you just have – it's going to be very interesting to see how the playoffs – because is a 3-loss Georgia or a 3-loss Bama, if that were to happen, would they get in if they have a really tough schedule and have some top wins? Because we've talked about the scheduling as well. There's some teams who are going to get 5 opportunities to take down top 10 teams.
I think
and
that
if
also
you lose 2 of those, that's not going to hurt you like it used to.
I think what it also comes down to as well is what is the rest of the country going to look like? Is the ACC is the leader of the SEC? Is it going to be a Clemson? It's going to be a Boston College. Like, who is going to be leading that SEC? The SEC has not looked great at all. If the winner of the SEC had do what?
ACC, you mean?
Is that
you're saying SEC? I'm just making sure we're.
Oh, the ACC. Yeah, sorry. The ACC does not look great at all right now, and the winner of that conference could be a 3-loss team, and they win the conference, they get an automatic bid, and then really nobody else from that conference is probably going to make the playoff, even with 3 wins or with 3 losses on their schedule for sure. So, and then you're looking at the Big Ten as well. Obviously, we're going to go ahead and count Ohio State in there as a shoe-in. Maybe a Penn State. They're looking, decent, but maybe not living up to the expectations that they probably were having. And then Oregon, I think, is another kind of crapshoot team. But who else from the Big Ten are you looking at it being an automatic bid that, you're a shoe-in for one of the 12 spots?
I mean, just Oregon and Ohio State for me. Obviously, a Michigan could still get in. A USC could still get in. There could be a dark horse like an Indiana who's looked really good this year so far that could get in. Obviously, Rutgers is having a good start to their year. So, but I just find it, unless an Indiana or Rutgers makes the Big Ten title and makes a game out of it, I just think name recognition, unfortunately, is always going to play into voters' minds when they look at the playoffs. So, out of the Big Ten, I wouldn't expect more than 2 teams just based off the play we've seen so far this year, but that could change as the year goes on.
So are you buying or selling?
Oh, I'm buying that the SEC will have 6 teams in.
I'm going to sell just for the simple fact of there are 5 automatic bids. Only one of those is an SEC team. So, you're getting that non-Power 5 team in there. There's going to be an Oregon. There's going to be somebody else from the Big Ten. You might sneak in another Big 12 team depending on what the rest of the season looks like for a Utah or even a BYU. I know those 2 teams play against each other this year, So we'll see kind of how things play out. And I just think, again, the SEC is going to beat up on each other. It's going to be very hard for the consistency week in and week out to maintain 2. I think at most you're very stretching it very thin as an 11 seed maybe for an Alabama or a Georgia or a Texas to go in and get in with a 3-loss season. It'll be very dependent on who those teams lose to and when they lose them in the season as well. So I think that's where you're starting to get that 16. If Mizzou has 2 losses, they're done. If a Tennessee has 2 losses, they're done. You have to have a very certain amount of high quality wins under your belt if you're going to make that 12-team playoff, and I just don't know if those teams' schedules allow them to if they drop a couple of games. Let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. Texas will have a Heisman winner within the next 3 seasons, including this one. I really want to say Quinn can win this thing, man. I really want to say Quinn can win this thing. Within the next 3 seasons, yeah, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that. I think Arch is going to be. I think Arch is going to. Maybe if he, after this Mississippi State game, even if he never plays another snap for Texas for the rest of the season, I think going into next season, he's going to be a top 3 Heisman candidate in his first year starting. And then after that season, whenever he plays again, he will be the number 1 candidate if he doesn't already win it by his sophomore season. So, yeah, I'm going to buy that. Including this one, Quinn is going to have a hell of a season, especially after missing 2 games.
For Quinn, it's all going to come down to OU and Georgia. We're going to know in, 3 weeks total, whether or not Quinn has a chance to win the Heisman. Because if he does not put up 300-plus yards in both of those games, he's just not going to win the Heisman. That's just how the Heisman works now. It's not necessarily about the aggregate of the stats. It is, because if it was, it would honestly, it'd probably be a Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
It is about being on the top team, and it's about performing in that top team's most important games. Obviously, an at A&M is also going to be another game that's under a spotlight. So we're going to know pretty quickly. I'd say he has 4 games to win the Heisman, and that's going to be OU, Georgia, Arkansas, and A&M.
And that's regular
if he doesn't
season.
show out in those games. Yeah, in the regular season.
He could have if he has big games in those games, if he has big games, and I'm talking like 300 yards plus, 3 to 4 touchdown passes, and then he goes into the SEC championship and plays lights out in the SEC championship like a Joe Burrow. I'm not saying he needs 10 touchdown passes in one game, OU fans, to do that, but it certainly would help. And so, and then going obviously into the playoffs as well. I don't even know with this extended playoff period when the Heisman would be announced. I'm assuming it would be after maybe the first round or second round games. They would announce the Heisman at that point going into the Final Four, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. But
yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and buy as well.
Okay.
I'm not going to – I think Quinn makes it to New York this year. I don't think he wins it. I think Cam Ward, or I do think a Travis Hunter is going to start getting his name talked about with what he's doing on both sides of the football.
It already should be out there. It should already be a favorite.
And I'm a Colorado hater.
Yeah, we can't stand Colorado on this podcast. But my thing is with Travis Hunter, I've loved Travis Hunter since he committed to Jackson State, and so I've been a big fan of Travis Hunter since day one. The Heisman is the best college football player in the country. That's what the title is. It is not best quarterback on the best team. It is not any of those other accolades that it has now become. It's the best college football player in the country, regardless of team success. And Travis Hunter is by far, in my opinion, the best college football player in the country. In fact, he's probably one of the better NFL players right now. If he would just declare for the draft and if he could suit up for a team right now, he'd probably be a starting corner for, Carolina or something like that. So, moving on to the next one, Jake, I'll let you take the lead on this one. Texas will win a national title within the next 3 years.
This is tough because winning a national title just got how many times harder than winning a national title get probably 5 times as hard as it was before. Yes, you can get in and get more chances, but to win a national title now, you're going to have to not only still have a very good regular season, but you're now going to have to beat multiple top teams and play your best football at the end of the year where you're possibly the most banged up. That's when you're going to have to play your best football. I mean, if you look at Texas, if they don't win the SEC title, if you go in as a 5 seed, the only saving grace is that you may just have to play the Big 12 or the ACC winner in a second round. But in the first round, obviously, a 5 seed might be one of the better spots to be. But if you're a 6 or a 7, you could have to beat a Georgia and a Bama and a Tennessee this year. Your road, depending the path you get, winning a national title is just significantly more difficult regardless of what seed you are. And just adding on those extra games, that's going to be adjustment for players who have never played this many games before.
Yeah.
in a college season. But with all that said, I said I'm going to buy them to win the Heisman. What comes along with Heisman? National titles.
Yep.
So I'm going to buy. I will say I think either this year or the third season, 2026, are going to be their best chances. I
Yeah.
think next year with a total retooling of the offensive line, they're going to be retooling the defensive line again. I
New
don't think
quarterback.
next year, new quarterback. I don't think next year is going to be that year. I think Arch will stay another year, and then I think they'll win in 2026.
Yeah, I am. I'm going to say if it doesn't happen this year, it will happen in 2026. Sark is going to have his team ready to go and ready to play year in and year out. Texas is finally out of the point of we're not. There's never a rebuild. There's just reloading talent year after year after year, and I'm sold on that now. I'm completely all in on that. I think a lot of analysts have kind of been like, you know what, Texas is at the Georgia Alabama point in terms of bringing in and reloading talent. It just needs to show with wins and national titles, and a lot believe it, and I have to believe it too. I think Texas within 3 years might win 2 national titles, Jake. But I am definitely buying this. And I completely agree with what you said in terms of if it's not this year, it won't be the following season, but it will be the 2026 season for sure. All right, Jake. Last one of buy or sell. A team that does not have a first round bye will not win the national title for at least 5 years.
I'm buying this. I have said from the start, I think the bye week is going to be very important, and I say that because your other top contenders are probably going to be playing in that conference championship game, and they're going to lose it because they're not going to have the bye. So not only are they going to have to play the extra games of the playoff, but they have to play the extra game of a conference
Mm,
championship too.
yeah.
And so I just
It,
think
it
it's
it
going to be
almost
very
benefits you.
difficult.
It almost benefits you to be an 8 seed. You didn't even make a conference title, and you're like an Alabama kind of on the outside looking in, and you get to skip that conference championship game, and then you just get to go straight into the playoffs, and you're like, all right, well, at least we got a little bit of extra rest and not as much wear and tear on the body, and we get to go in, not going into the playoffs with a loss on the schedule either.
Yeah, maybe a segment for a different day because I know time runs short. But I think this makes conference championship games maybe not the most important they've ever been, but I think they are just as important as they've always been. And some people have argued against that. I think the bye makes them extremely important.
Yeah, I think the bye week going into the college football playoffs is going to be huge. And then, like you said, if you lose that game, it almost does your team more of a disservice than if you didn't even make the conference championship game in the first place. There's so many different aspects to it. I think losing the conference championship game almost is more detrimental to your team's success than maybe it ever has been in the past.
Yeah. And so are you buying or selling
Yeah,
this? I don't
yeah,
think you
I'll
said
buy.
that.
I'll buy that. Yeah, I will. I think it's going to be paramount that a team gets that first round bye going into the and until teams start realizing there's a little bit of a strategy to it, until teams start kind of figuring things out in terms of the grind of the playoffs. The first 5 years is going to be extremely important to have the least amount of wear and tear on your guys going into it. All right, Jake, that's going to do it for the segment of buy or sell. I think that was fun. That was fun. We'll bring that back for sure. That was a good time. Jake, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the upcoming games this week around the country. Let's just hit on them briefly because I know we want to get to the granddaddy of them all, Alabama, Georgia, but we'll get through these pretty quickly and we'll talk about the spread. Oklahoma State at Kansas State. Again, an implication of what could be a Big 12 championship repercussions going into this. But Kansas State coming off a very ugly loss to BYU a week, 4.5 point spread for Kansas State. The over/under set at 55.5.
Yeah, I've placed a responsible bet on the Kansas State Wildcats already. So I have K-State winning. I have them covering. if you look at that BYU game, they outgained them. They just lost because of turnovers and punt returns. I don't think Oklahoma State's that good, so give me K-State to win big at home.
I'm going to go with Oklahoma State, actually. I think Kansas State's going to be, on their heels a little bit. I do think they're probably a better football program, but I think Oklahoma State is going to start kind of getting into the groove of things a little bit. This is the Mike Gundy season right here. September, October, going into the middle of the season. This is just when he wins football games. Louisville at Notre Dame, Jake. Notre Dame is 6-point favorites, over under set at 47.5. What's your take?
Give me Louisville outright. This is one of my upsets of the week. I think Louisville's a playoff contender. I think it's them and Miami in the ACC, and then Clemson, and then everyone else. So give me Louisville to get a big win.
Man, if Notre Dame loses this game, they are out of playoff contention. They're done. This is going to end their season right here, right now. You might as well not even play the rest of the season. But yeah, I actually really like your take, Jake. I'll go Louisville as well. I'm actually I'm going to take the under. I think I think this will be a pretty low scoring game, but I like Louisville in this one, even if they struggle a little bit on offense. But that Notre Dame team, they're wishy-washy. I'm not completely sold on them bouncing back from the loss to Northern Illinois. Arkansas A&M, this one is always played in Jerry World at AT&T in Dallas, Texas. A&M 4-point favorites, over under set at 52.5. Jake, how do you feel about this one?
I didn't pick A&M. I picked them to win week 1. They made me look stupid. Then I picked them to lose against Florida, and they dominated. So, considering that trend, give me A&M to win by 3 touchdowns.
See what you did there, Jake. A little reverse psychology. I don't have the same issue you do, so I'm going to take Arkansas to win this thing outright. I think Arkansas is finally they're kind of where Texas was a couple of years ago, where they're a very good program and you can kind of see the potential, but they're just losing close, ugly games, and things just kind of aren't going their way. Something's got to switch eventually for them, and I think it does in this game. I think they edge out a very close fought game against A&M. Illinois at Penn State, Jake. This one typically we wouldn't really talk about all that much, but Illinois having the season that they're having makes this one a little bit interesting. At Penn State, 17.5-point favorites. What do you got going on in this one?
I want to pick Illinois to win. I've already picked a lot of upsets today. I'm going to say they're going to cover. I think that spread's kind of crazy, to be honest. But I do think Penn State wins this, but I think it's going to be Penn State by a field goal.
Yeah, I think Penn State wins this one. I think they take care of them handedly. I think actually I might take Penn State with the spread as well. I think it might be a 3-score game. Oklahoma at Auburn. Jake, Auburn has looked ugly on offense. OU has not looked much better. OU 2.5-point favorites. The first start for the new quarterback at Oklahoma. You were a little bit more impressed with him than a Jackson Arnold. Now, yes, that was garbage time, maybe a little bit of charity points there at the end of the Tennessee game. OU 2.5-point favorites. How are you feeling?
He looked much more poised. He also can make plays with his legs. I think he is going to struggle a little bit in this game. Auburn has a pretty decent defense from what we've seen so far this year, but I cannot pick Auburn. I don't think this game's going to be particularly close. I think OU will win by 17, mainly because Auburn has not had a game where they have not turned it over at least twice, and that is a recipe for disaster against this OU defense. I think the OU defense could play the Auburn offense the entire game, and they would still win by 3 scores.
I love it. Yeah, I think OU pitches a shutout in this one. Auburn's offense has looked dreadful. I think OU is going to shut them out. I don't know how many points they're going to score on the offensive side of the ball, but I do think their defense is going to set them up to where maybe their offense looks a little bit better points-wise than what they have. But yeah, I think I'm going to take OU as a heavy favorite, not just by 2.5 in this one. All right, and the granddaddy of them all, Jake, Georgia at Bama. We'll end it with this one. Georgia 2-point favorites, over under at 48.5. I'm going to go ahead and just say I really, really want Georgia to win this game for the sake of the importance of the Texas-Georgia game in just a few weeks. If Georgia comes in with 1 loss and it's not number 1 versus number 2, as just a fan of college football, I'm really wanting number one, number two. And as a fan of the Texas Longhorns, I really want Georgia to go into that game undefeated. I'm rooting for Georgia in this game. Bama, on the other hand, in Tuscaloosa, I just have this weird feeling that Georgia's offense has not looked particularly smooth, and the defense for Georgia isn't what the Georgia defense has been over the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this game, and here's why I'm picking Georgia. And not only just because I'm in the same boat as you and wanting them to win. Alabama's offense so far has relied on explosive plays. Georgia's defense might not be, and if you look at the stats, they do look as dominant as they've been, but they do not give up explosive plays. That is, they've given up, I think, 2 plays all season over 20 yards.
Georgia does have the number one passing defense in the country.
Yeah, and I think that gives them a big advantage. I think their offense is going to struggle in this game, but Alabama's defense is not what Alabama defenses have always been known for necessarily.
That's true.
And granted, we haven't seen them necessarily have a tough game yet, but other than USF, but I like Georgia in this game. I think the revenge factor plays in here a little bit, even though it's not Nick Saban. They lost him in the SEC title game. Kirby Smart has been saying that all week. I mean, he somehow made his team believe they were underdogs against TCU. So I like Georgia in this game. I think it's going to be very close. I think it's a coin flip game at the end of the day. But I think Milton has a fumble, 2 interceptions, and then that's going to be the difference in the game.
Is Kirby Smart 1-6 against Alabama, or is he 1-6 against Nick Saban?
Nick Saban and Alabama have been the same thing. I mean, just for so long, it's hard to know the difference.
But does that make a difference with Kalen DeBoer as the head coach?
I think if Alabama loses this, it's not because of the change of the coach. I think DeBoer's a really, really good coach, a top 5 coach in college football, probably top 3 or 4 at least. And I think he's going to keep Alabama where they've been. Their recruiting is still on track, but I'm not picking them to win because Nick Saban's gone. I'm just picking them to win because they're Georgia, and when they're coming off a loss, I just have a hard time envisioning a team beating Georgia 2 times in a row, whether that be in separate years or not, with where Georgia has been lately.
I was going to say, not coming off of a loss this season, ladies and gentlemen, but he means going into that SEC
it's Kirby
championship.
Smart. He uses everything as motivation.
The fact that Georgia probably very well could have beaten that Michigan team a season ago had they made the playoffs is kind of a scary thought. I mean, there were a ton of people saying Georgia should have been in one of those 4 spots.
Yeah, I think they probably would have been the odds-on favorite to win the national title if they made the playoff, even with that loss.
Yeah, I think they were better than Washington.
Themselves.
Yeah.
They beat themselves against Alabama. I don't think they're going to beat themselves this year, and I think Milton has shown to turn over the ball in big games at times.
Are you talking about Milrow?
He did not play good. Milrow, jeez.
I'm sorry. I was
thank you.
Yeah. Jalen Milrow, the quarterback for Bama. Yeah.
Yeah, I read an article about Joe Milton earlier, and it just threw me.
Yeah.
But, thank you for the correction. But Milrow has turned over the ball in big games. He did not play good in the semifinal game last year, and I think he's going to make a couple mistakes that are going to cost them the game. Also, Alabama's relying on a true freshman wide receiver to lead the way in Ryan Williams, and I just don't think that's a good recipe against Georgia.
And last but not least, Jake, the Texas game, something we have not given our predictions for. Yes, we are running over time, but we're just having fun tonight. And we've got a big interview. The reason why we're doing predictions for this episode, we have an interview that's going to take up our entire episode for tomorrow's episode. So the predictions are going to get moved forward into Thursday. Either way, here are our predictions. Jake, you did mention a standout performance from the offensive line earlier this week. Do you care to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, I just want to see explosives in the run game. I want to see guys getting pushed back into the linebackers. I think the offensive line needs to send a message that we're in the SEC now. This is the first SEC game. Yes, it's against a weaker opponent, but we're going to show the caliber we are by doing what we should against a lesser caliber team. I like Texas in this game. That 38.5 point number is just a lot of points. I think maybe this is where the winning against the spread ends. But I think they win by 35 points. It's going to be one of those bad beats. Mississippi State gets a field goal at the end, some type of fluky play that
Yeah.
causes them not to cover.
Jake, as much as Longhorn fans are not going to want to hear me say this, I feel like Mississippi State might give Texas a little bit of a game within the first half. I'm not saying it's going to be necessarily close, like a one score game going into halftime. I just think Mississippi State's going to look much better than the teams that Texas has played up to this point. When it comes to UL Monroe, UTSA, maybe not Michigan, but I just think that Mississippi State is going to come out and actually play somewhat, inspired for whatever reason. Maybe it's just to try to play spoiler and to shut Texas fans up and shut down the new kid on the block. I don't know what it is, but I do think Mississippi State's going to come out and try to play this game pretty well. And they know Arch is going to be the starter, more like 90% sure that he's going to be the starter. So, my standout performers are going to be I think it's going to be a Matthew Golden game. I just think I have a feeling that one of these wide receivers, whether it be Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, or Ryan Wingo, I think it's going to be a big passing day because the running backs are so thin. As much as we want them to run the ball with Jaden Blue, and he's going to be the primary running back there for the entire game, Sark is not going to want the extra wear and tear on him. He's going to want to try to preserve him a little bit. I think that's going to open up screen games, short passing game, intermediate passing game. And I think that's bound to be in Isaiah Bond or Matthew Golden breaking one or two or three. But I'm going to say a multiple touchdown game for Matthew Golden. I think Texas wins this one 45-17. I do think that they are going to take care of business, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer than maybe what Texas fans want early in this game. So with all that said, Jake, any last words?
I hope we see Quinn on Saturday. I hope you're wrong on your 90% prediction. We'd only have so many games left to see Quinn. So I hope we see Quinn, and I hope everyone enjoys tomorrow's episode. I think it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool information, and hook them.
Yep. First interview on the All In Horns podcast tomorrow at noon. Tune in. It's going to be a really good one. We do not disappoint. I promise you. It's a very fun, informative interview that we've got. So stay tuned with that. Again, like, share, subscribe. And as always, like Jake said, got to double down on it. Hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports. All in